think this is exactly the kind of situation that you could see Sam Howell go into that could help optimize his chances for success. Kyle Krabs of the Draft Network here with everything you need to know about the Washington Commanders 2022 NFL Draft Class. Washington entered this year's draft having already answered the most pressing question of their offseason, which was who's going to play the quarterback position. Trading picks for quarterback Carson Wentz from the Indianapolis Colts. Wentz now on his third team in as many years. This year's draft was dedicated to trying to surround Wentz and complement the roster with the right players to help close the gap in the NFC East. So how did they do? Well, at pick 16, Washington drafted wide receiver Jahan Dotson from Penn State. Well, Terry McLaurin is here. Curtis Samuel is here. Dotson, I think, slots in very nicely as a complementary receiver to what Washington has in Terry McLaurin. Curtis Samuel, a little bit more of a gadget type player inside in the slot. Dotson can play in the slot, but he can also play outside, and he can also get vertical. I think he's a little bit more well-rounded as a receiver. And as he showcased at Penn State, he could be a volume guy. And I think that's going to be very important for him as he hits the ground running. I think he's a starting wide receiver for the Washington Commanders from the jump. Now, in the second round is where things got interesting for Washington. They drafted Phidarian Mathis, the defensive lineman from the University of Alabama. And obviously, everybody knows Washington's had a soft spot for Alabama defensive players for quite some time. But Phidarian Mathis and how he fits into the picture here in Washington early on, I think he's a rotational player, barring a trade from somebody else who's more established and more expensive on the depth chart in front of him. I think Phidarian Mathis is somebody who helps keep things fresh and is getting rotational reps, 20, 25 reps a game to help ensure that Washington can play stout and help own the line of scrimmage, which is part of what this DNA is on the defensive side of the football. But I think his dividends in year 3 and year 4 will pay off much more than his dividends in year 1. Same could be said for their third round pick, Brian Robinson Jr. Obviously, Antonio Gibson in the picture here in this backfield. And Gibson, once upon a time a fantasy darling, hasn't taken that next step in his game. So what do? You bring in a complementary skill set to pair with him. Like Phidarian Mathis, I think Brian Robinson is a rotational player on the offensive side of the ball in the backfield. I think he'll probably get around 100 touches this season in total, but I think he'll be much more effective in between the tackles as a runner. And that dynamic, he gives a little bit more of a thunder and lightning dynamic for that Washington backfield. Washington made 5 picks on day 3, starting with Percy Butler, the safety from Louisiana. And whether or not he plays safety or not, they probably have some kind of vision for him there, given that they made him the 113th overall pick. But this dude's going to play special teams early and often. And he's probably going to get several contracts in the NFL for his ability to do so. And anytime you can get that kind of player on the third day of an NFL draft, it's a job well done. I really like what Percy Butler, a football player, is going to bring to the Washington Commanders. On the 5th round, a couple of developmental types for Washington. Quarterback Sam Howell at 144 and tight end Cole Turner at 149. Sam Howell wasn't expected to be on the board in the 5th round, and I think this is exactly the kind of situation that you could see Sam Howell go into that could help optimize his chances for success. He has some receivers now in Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson who can win down the field, and that was very much the style of that North Carolina offense that Sam Howell played in. But I don't think Sam Howell's ready to play NFL football. And with Carson Wentz in the picture, Howell will at best be the QB2, probably be the third quarterback kept on the roster for this upcoming season. And that should give him plenty of time to settle into playing quarterback at the NFL and serving as a developmental quarterback in year 1 who probably does not see the field unless this season takes a turn for the worse. Cole Turner, I think his pathway to getting on the playing field is really going to be rooted in his ability to continue doing what he did at Nevada really well, which is catch fades in the red zone. That was where he got a lot of his production. And I think if he's going to get on the field, that's the way in which he's going to do it. But I think he's going to be a game situation, area of the field, and down and distance type specialist as a receiver. I really think he needs to benefit from some NFL strength and conditioning, especially to what he had at Nevada. So Cole Turner, probably your tight end 3, maybe your tight end 4, potentially some special teams. But as far as actually playing the tight end position, I think this is somebody who's going to need a little bit of time, much like Sam Howell at the quarterback position. 2 7th-round picks to bring things to a close for Washington: Chris Paul at 230 and cornerback Christian Holmes at 240 from Oklahoma State. Chris Paul, some tackle guard versatility. That's always a good thing. And he has an NFL build right now. I think he makes the Commanders' depth chart as a utility offensive lineman. Obviously, with the departure of Brandon Scherf, you need to restructure and reshuffle your depth chart a little bit. And I think Chris Paul can be one of the beneficiaries as a position flexible guy at the bottom of this list. Whereas Christian Holmes is really going to be in a dogfight, in my eyes, to make this roster. He's going to have to do it on teams. He's going to have to tackle well. He's going to have to make a splash in training camp and in the preseason. We'll see if that comes his way. We'll also see if this draft class was enough for Washington to close the gap on the rest of the NFC East. So make sure you subscribe to the channel and visit thedraftnetwork.com for all your NFL, college football, and NFL draft needs.